The Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, commonly referred to as Soviet Russia or simply as Russia, was a sovereign state in 1917–22, the largest, most populous, and most economically developed republic of the Soviet Union in 1922–91, and a sovereign part of the Soviet Union with its own legislation in 1990–91. The republic comprised 16 autonomous republics, 5 autonomous oblasts, 10 autonomous okrugs, 6 krais, and 40 oblasts. Russians formed the largest ethnic group. The RSFSR was established on November 7, 1917 as a sovereign state. The first constitution was adopted in 1918. In 1922 the Russian SFSR signed the Treaty on the Creation of the USSR. The economy of Russia became heavily industrialized, accounting for about two-thirds of the electricity produced in the USSR. It was, by 1961, the third largest producer of petroleum due to new discoveries in the Volga-Urals region and Siberia, trailing only the United States and Saudi Arabia. In 1974, there were 475 institutes of higher education in the Republic providing education in 47 languages to some 23,941,000 students. A network of territorially organized public health services provided health care. After 1985, the restructuring policies of the Gorbachev administration relatively liberalized the economy, which had become stagnant since the late 1970s, with the introduction of non-state-owned enterprises such as cooperatives. The effects of market policies led to the failure of many enterprises and total instability by 1990. On June 12, 1990, the Congress of People's Deputies adopted the Declaration of State Sovereignty. On June 12, 1991, Boris Yeltsin was elected the first president. On December 8, 1991, heads of Russia, Ukraine and Belarus signed the Belavezar Accords. The agreement declared dissolution of the USSR by its founder states and established the CIS. On December 12, the agreement was ratified by the Russian parliament. Therefore, Russian SFSR denounced the Treaty on the Creation of the USSR and de facto declared Russia's independence from the USSR. On December 25, 1991, the Russian SFSR was renamed the Russian Federation. On December 26, 1991, the USSR was self-dissolved by the Soviet of Nationalities, which by that time was the only functioning house of the Supreme Soviet. After dissolution of the USSR, Russia declared that it assumed the rights and obligations of the dissolved Central Soviet government, including UN membership. The new Russian constitution, adopted on December 12, 1993 after a constitutional crisis, abolished the Soviet system of government in its entirety. Nomenclature. Under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin, the Bolsheviks established the Soviet state on 7 November 1917, immediately after the Russian Provisional Government, which governed the Russian Republic, was overthrown during the October Revolution. Initially, the state did not have an official name and wasn't recognized by neighboring countries for 5 months. Meanwhile, anti-Bolsheviks coined the mocking label Sovdepia for the nascent state of the Soviets of Workers' and Peasants' Deputies. On January 25, 1918, the third meeting of the All-Russian Congress of Soviets renamed the unrecognized state the Soviet Russian Republic. The Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was signed on March 3, 1918, giving away much of the land of the former Russian Empire to Germany in exchange for peace during the rest of World War I. On July 10, 1918, the Russian Constitution of 1918 renamed the country the Russian Socialist Federative Soviet Republic. By 1918, during the Russian Civil War, several states within the former Russian Empire seceded, reducing the size of the country even more. Internationally, in 1920, the RSFSR was recognized as an independent state only by Estonia, Finland, Latvia and Lithuania in the Treaty of Tartu and by the short-lived Irish Republic. On December 30, 1922, with the creation of the Soviet Union, Russia became one of 16 republics within the Federation of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. The final Soviet name for the republic, the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic, was adopted in the Soviet Constitution of 1936. By the time, Soviet Russia had gained roughly the same borders of the old Tsardom of Russia before the Great Northern War of 1700. For most of the Soviet Union's existence, it was commonly referred to as Russia, even though technically Russia was only one republic within the larger Union, albeit by far the largest, most powerful and most highly developed. On December 25, 1991, following the collapse of the Soviet Union, the republic was renamed the Russian Federation, which it remains to this day. This name and Russia were specified as the official state names in the April 21, 1992 amendment to the existing constitution and were retained as such in the 1993 Constitution of Russia. Geography. At a total of 17,125,200 kilometers, the Russian FSR was the largest of its 15 republics, with its southerly neighbor, the Kazakh SR, being second. The international borders of the RSFSR touched Poland on the west, Norway and Finland on the northwest, and to its southeast were the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, Mongolian People's Republic, and the People's Republic of China. Within the Soviet Union, the RSFSR bordered the Ukrainian, Belarusian, Estonian, Latvian and Lithuanian SSRs to its west and Azerbaijan, Georgian and Kazakh SSRs to the south. Roughly 70% of the area in the RSFSR consisted of broad plains, with mountainous tundra regions mainly concentrated in the east. The area is rich in mineral resources, including petroleum, natural gas, and iron ore. History. Early years. The Soviet government first came to power on November 7, 1917, immediately after the Russian Provisional Government, which governed the Russian Republic, was overthrown in the October Revolution. The state it governed, which did not have an official name, would be unrecognized by neighboring countries for another 5 months. On January 25, 1918, at the third meeting of the All-Russian Congress of Soviets, the unrecognized state was renamed the Soviet Russian Republic. On March 3, 1918, the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk was signed, giving away much of the land of the former Russian Empire to Germany, in exchange for peace in World War I. On July 10, 1918, the Russian Constitution of 1918 renamed the country the Russian Socialist Federative Soviet Republic. By 1918, during the Russian Civil War, several states within the former Russian Empire had seceded, reducing the size of the country even more. The RSFSR was recognized as an independent state internationally by only Estonia, Finland, Latvia, and Lithuania in the Treaty of Tartu in 1920. 1920s. On December 30, 1922, the First Congress of the Soviets of the USSR approved the Treaty on the Creation of the USSR, by which Russia was united with the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic, Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republic, and Transcaucasian Soviet Federal Socialist Republic into a single federal state, the Soviet Union. Later treaty was included in the 1924 Soviet Constitution adopted on January 31, 1924 by the Second Congress of Soviets of the USSR. Paragraph 3 of Chapter 1 of the 1925 Constitution of the RSFSR states the following: by the will of the peoples of the Russian Socialist Federative Soviet Republic, who decided on the formation of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics during the 10th All-Russian Congress of Soviets, the Russian Socialist Federative Soviet Republic, being a part of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, devolves to the Union the powers which, according to Article 1 of the Constitution of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, are included within the scope of responsibilities of the government bodies of the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. 1930s. Many regions in Russia were affected by the Soviet famine of 1932–1933. Volga, Central Black Soil region, North Caucasus, the Urals, the Crimea, part of Western Siberia, and the Kazakh ASSR. With the adoption of the 1936 Soviet Constitution on December 5, 1936, the size of the RSFSR was significantly reduced. The Kazakh ASSR and Kyrgyz ASSR were transformed into the Kazakh and Kyrgyz Soviet Socialist Republics. The Karakalpak Autonomous Socialist Soviet Republic was transferred to the Uzbek SSR. The final name for the republic during the Soviet era was adopted by the Russian Constitution of 1937, which renamed it the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic. 1940s. In 1943, Karachi Autonomous Oblast was dissolved by Joseph Stalin, when the Karachis were exiled to Central Asia for their alleged collaboration with the Germans, and territory was incorporated into the Georgian SSR. On March 3, 1944, on the orders of Stalin, the Chechen-Ingush SSR was disbanded and its population forcibly deported upon the accusations of collaboration with the invaders and separatism. The territory of the ASSR was divided between other administrative units of Russian SFSR and the Georgian SSR. On October 11, 1944, the Tuvan People's Republic joined the Russian SFSR as the Tuvan Autonomous Oblast, in 1961 becoming an autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic, after reconquering Estonia and Latvia in 1944. The Russian SFSR annexed their easternmost territories around Ivangorod within the modern Pekarsky and Pythalovsky districts in 1944–1945. At the end of World War II, Soviet troops occupied southern Sakhalin Island and the Kuril Islands, making them part of the RSFSR. The status of the southernmost Kurils remains in dispute with Japan. On April 17, 1946, the Kaliningrad Oblast, the northern portion of the former German province of East Prussia, was annexed by the Soviet Union and made part of the Russian SFSR. 1950s. After the death of Joseph Stalin, March 5, 1953, Georgy Malenkov became the new leader of the USSR. In January 1954, Malenkov transferred Crimea from the Russian SFSR to the Ukrainian SSR. On February 8, 1955, Malenkov was officially demoted to Deputy Prime Minister. As First Secretary of the Central Committee of the Communist Party, Nikita Khrushchev's authority was significantly enhanced by Malenkov's demotion. On January 9, 1957, Karachi Autonomous Oblast and Chechen-Ingush Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic were restored by Khrushchev, and they were transferred from the Georgian SSR back to the Russian SFSR. The Karelo-Finnish SSR was transferred back to the RSFSR as the Karelian ASSR in 1956. 1960s, 1980s. In 1964, Nikita Khrushchev was removed from his position of power and replaced with Leonid Brezhnev. Under his rule, the Russian SFSR and the rest of the Soviet Union went through an era of stagnation. Even after he died in 1982, the era didn't end until Mikhail Gorbachev took power in March 1985 and introduced liberal reforms in Soviet society. Early 1990s. On May 29, 1990, at his third attempt, Boris Yeltsin was elected the chairman of the Supreme Soviet of the Russian SFSR. On June 12, 1990, the Congress of People's Deputies of the Republic adopted the Declaration of State Sovereignty of the Russian SFSR, which was the beginning of the War of Laws, pitting the Soviet Union against the Russian Federation and other constituent republics. On March 17, 1991, an all-Russian referendum created the post of President of the RSFSR. On June 12, Boris Yeltsin was elected President of Russia by popular vote. During an unsuccessful coup attempt on August 19–21, 1991 in Moscow, the capital of the Soviet Union and Russia, President of Russia Yeltsin strongly supported the President of the Soviet Union, Mikhail Gorbachev. On August 23, after the failure of GKCHP, in the presence of Gorbachev, Yeltsin signed a decree suspending all activity by the Communist Party of the Russian SFSR in the territory of Russia. On November 6, he went further, banning the Communist parties of the USSR and the RSFSR from the territory of the RSFSR. On December 8, 1991, at Vyskuli near Brest, the President of the Russian SFSR and the heads of Belarusian SSR and Ukrainian SSR signed the Agreement on the Establishment of the Commonwealth of Independent States. The document, consisting of a preamble and 14 articles, stated that the Soviet Union ceased to exist as a subject of international law and geopolitical reality. However, based on the historical community of peoples' relations between them, given the bilateral treaties, the desire for a democratic rule of law, the intention to develop the relations based on mutual recognition and respect for state sovereignty, the parties agreed to the formation of the Commonwealth of Independent States. On December 12, the agreement was ratified by the Supreme Soviet of the Russian SFSR by an overwhelming majority, 188 votes for, 6 against, 7 abstentions. On the same day, the Supreme Soviet of the Russian SFSR denounced the Treaty on the Creation of the USSR and recalled all Russian deputies from the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union. The legality of this act is the subject of discussions because, according to the 1978 Constitution of the Russian SFSR, the Russian Supreme Soviet had no right to do so. However, by this time the Soviet government had been rendered more or less impotent, and was in no position to object. Although the December 12 vote is sometimes reckoned as the moment that the RSFSR seceded from the collapsing Soviet Union, this is not the case. It appears that the RSFSR took the line that it was not possible to secede from an entity that no longer existed. On December 24, Yeltsin informed the Secretary-General of the United Nations that by agreement of the member states of the CIS, Russian Federation would assume the membership of the Soviet Union in all UN organs. Thus, Russia is considered to be an original member of the UN along with Ukraine and Belarus. On December 25, just hours after Gorbachev resigned as President of the Soviet Union, the Russian SFSR was renamed the Russian Federation, reflecting that it was now a sovereign state with Yeltsin assuming the presidency. That same night, the Soviet flag was lowered and replaced with the tricolor. The Soviet Union officially ceased to exist the next day. The change was originally published on January 6, 1992. According to law, during 1992, it was allowed to use the old name of the RSFSR for official business. The Russian Federation's Constitution of 1978, though with the 1991-1992 amendments, remained in effect until the 1993 Russian constitutional crisis. The name Russian Federation had also been used in Soviet times. Government. The government was known officially as the Council of People's Commissars, Council of Ministers and Council of Ministers Government. The first government was headed by Vladimir Lenin as chairman of the Council of People's Commissars of the Russian SFSR, and the last by Boris Yeltsin as both head of government and head of state under the title President. The Russian SFSR was controlled by the Communist Party of the Soviet Union until the abortive 1991 August coup, which prompted President Yeltsin to suspend the recently created Communist Party of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic.